We are unmuted now.
Okay, so
Roll call.
I'm sorry.
You want me to do roll call?
Well, let me first start off. Good afternoon, folks. Do we have anybody appearing on Zoom? We do, I see. So welcome, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Board of Trustees of the General Employees Retirement Plan. Could we have roll call, Jill?
Sure. Alan Bush,
Here.
Brett Dennis,
Here.
Don Holmes,
Here.
Jonathan Griffiths, Tammy McCaskill are both absent.
So we do have a quorum,
Yes, we do.
and with that, we'll proceed. If we could have approval of the minutes first. Has everyone received and had an opportunity to review the minutes?
I have. I'll make a motion to accept.
Any discussion necessary? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, number 3 is a report by Mr. Donlin from Foster and Foster, and who is here in person. I think it's been our pleasure to deal with you via Zoom over the last couple of meetings, has it not?
I don't know if you want to call that pleasure, but yes.
Every now and then I've been known for having to practice a little bit of sarcasm. So.
Well, I appreciate that. It's a long drive up here, so it works out nice when you can do that, but I like to come here at least once a year.
We appreciate you coming in person.
Just want to remind everyone to turn on your microphone when you're speaking.
Turn it off.
So in your packet, the big report at the beginning is the valuation report. And so if you go to page 6 of the report, every year as of October 1st, we look at the assets in the pension plan, and then we project out all the future retirement benefits. So we can determine an appropriate funding for the next year. And we always do it 1 year ahead. So the 10/1/2020 is in the right column, and that determines the funding requirements for the year we're in right now. And then the left column is the amount for next year. And so you can see the costs went down, which is always a good thing. The total required contribution went from 41.6% of payroll to 39.6% of payroll. And then the members contribute 6%. So the bottom line city went from 35.6 to 33.6. And we'll talk about why that is as we go through the report. One big reason is the investment return. So if you go to page 29, so last year, if you recall, we started over with the smoothing. We set the market and actuarial value the same. And then going forward, we were going to use a new 5-year smoothing technique. And so if you look towards the top, it says development of investment gain or loss. And it says at the beginning of the year, we had $19.1 million in the plan. And we have a 7.5% expectation. And so we expected to earn about $1.4 million on those investments. And the actual earnings were about $3.4 million. So we beat the return expectation by over $2 million, $2,019,000. And that was a return of 18.21%. So basically our new smoothing says, okay, we got this $2 million gain. We're going to spread it out over 5 years. So we're deferring $1.6 million in this valuation. We're recognizing $403,000. Each year for 5 years, we'll recognize another $403,000 of that gain. So it means that if we get a loss this year, we're not off to a great start, then there'll be another line at the top and it'll say 9/30/2022, and there might be a $2 million loss. but those would wash each other out. And then the city's costs aren't going to increase because of it.
Would you consider that 5-year allocation to be conservative?
I like a 5-year. Burgess asked a question earlier today, but if you go too long, you get too far away from the market value, the real assets in the plan. And we were using a 4-year smoothing. The 5 is a little more smooth. So I like a 5-year smoothing.
Okay.
Does everybody understand how that works? So if you go to page 36, that's the turnover. So remember I said we look at the assets and then we project out everybody's future retirement benefits. Well, if everybody terminates after 5 years and nobody retires, then we don't have to put in any contributions, right? If everybody works till retirement, we're going to need to put in a lot of contributions. So turnover makes a difference. And this year that helped you as far as the pension plan. It probably wasn't good for the department, but it was good for the pension plan because you had 88 non-drop members at the beginning of the year, and you had 23 of those people terminate non-vested. 20 of them got refunds of contributions, and 3 of them just hadn't yet gotten a refund. But you had 23 non-vested terminations, and we expected about 11. So, you basically had double the turnover that you would normally expect.
3 of them had what?
3 of them had terminated non-vested, and they just hadn't yet gotten their refund of
So
contribution.
still owed to them then.
Right, exactly. Yep. And then sadly, you had 1 member pass away, and then you had 2 members enter the drop, and then you hired 18 new members. So you ended up with 80. So your overall membership actually went down a little bit. It's always a snapshot, 10-1 of each year. So I don't know if those positions are being filled or what, but as of 10/1/2021, you had 80 non-drop, and then you had 6 people in the drop. So that's 86 employees altogether. And then at the bottom of the page, again, it's kind of sucks being an actuary because everything that's good for everybody else is bad for the pension plan and vice versa. So at the bottom of the page, you had 97 retirees at the beginning of the year, and you had 11 of them pass away. 2 of them were actually ones that had previously passed away, but they were on the joint survivor, so we didn't notice it until this year. But you actually had 9 deaths this year, and we only expect about 3. So that was a gain to the plan, sadly.
Excuse me, is someone speaking? Hi, this is Valeria Thomas. I can't hear.
Well, if you come
I'm
to these
sorry.
meetings, you could hear us, Ms. Thomas.
I'm sorry, I didn't have my phone.
If somebody speaks on the microphone, I can hear too.
Yes.
There you go. It's just like an attorney. What I had asked was whether or not we keep track of events such as the passing of a former employee, a retiree, for the purpose of sending a letter. I was thinking of a letter of condolences to the family, and Jill was indicating that we don't. And I don't mean to imply that that was her job or that she hasn't done something she was supposed to do. I was just thinking that from an HR perspective, it would be nice you only have 9 or 10 or whatever, 3 a year that you send, the city send out a letter, just, just of condolence, card, whatever. Will you remind me of that, Jill?
Sure, I will.
Thanks.
So now if you want to go to page 44. And so this is the accounting of the plan. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So this is the accounting of the plan, and this is what the city puts in their financial statements. And they have to book a liability for the pension plan, and that's called the net pension liability. And this, the GASB does not use smoothing of the assets. Remember, we used that 5-year smoothing for funding? The accounting does not, because the accounting says, what's the money that's in the plan? It doesn't use any smoothing. So this year, that really helped you because the net pension liability went from $7.3 million last year to $5.2 million this year. So a real nice improvement in that net pension liability. And from a funded percentage, that went from 72% to 80.8%. And a lot of plans try to be in that 80 to 100% range. So you went right into that range with this valuation. If we're just looking at the market value of assets, not using the smoothing. So then if you want to go all the way back to page 17. So this page does use the smoothing. It uses the actuarial value of assets, and it determines an unfunded actuarial accrued liability. And last year that was $7,854,000. And we make a payment each year to pay that down. That's part of the funding requirement. So we expected it to go to $7,442,000. And in the end, it was $6,597,000. And so you can see there was a net actuarial gain there, just our regular experience of $1,058,000. So $403,000 was investment return. It was really a $2 million gain that we had, but remember, we're just recognizing 20% each year. And then salary increases were a gain. If people get lower salary increases, then their projected benefits at retirement go down. Turnover was a gain of $263,000. Mortality was a gain of $351,000. So overall, all the experience was positive for the pension plan. And then you guys at the previous meeting or 2 meetings ago, you guys approved making assumption changes. Remember, we did that experience study. So making those assumption changes increased the liability by $214,000. So that's how we got from 7.8 million last year to 6.6 million this year. So a nice improvement in the unfunded actuarial accrued liability. So then and since you're already there, if you look at page 18, this is your funded ratio, and it's stayed relatively the same for the past 10 years. You were at 2011, you were at about 75% funded ratio. In 2021, you're probably 76% funded ratio. And that uses the smooth value that we were talking about. So lastly, if you want to go to page 12. So the top line on page 12 is the normal cost, and that's just the normal cost of each member accruing benefits 1 more year. That's stable. It went from 12.4% And that middle column is what this year's report would be without any assumption changes. And the left column is with the assumption changes. And so it would have went to 12.7. It's lower with the new assumptions at 11.4. Administrative expenses stayed about the same. And then the payment to pay down that unfunded, well, because your unfunded went down some, that payment went down some. 28% last year to 26.9% this year. So you just add those three pieces together, and that gives you the total required contribution. So those were kind of the highlights of the report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
I
When
don't,
you smooth over 5 years, if you lose, say this year we lost $2 million, would you, what you put aside, you carry that over 5, you take the whole thing and put it in there right there, and then what happens? It goes back to just.
No, we're going to smooth that also. So if you go back to page 29. So the top of page 29, this year we had a gain of 2,019,000.
Yeah.
And then the next line says gains or losses not yet recognized. So in 2021 valuation, we have $1.6 million there that we haven't yet recognized for that gain. So then in 2022, let's say that's a negative 2 million. Then in 2022, there'll be $1.6 million negative that we haven't yet recognized. So they'll kind of add on top of each other, these layers. So it's not immediate, all of them are going to be spread out over 5 years. So it'll have
That's
this.
kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So a question on the expected contribution, we're at 35.6 currently, right? For budgeting purposes, though, we won't know until we get later in the year what we're going to end at, right? We're not going to know what for the budget for next year.
Well, for next year, the requirement will be exactly 33.6% of whatever payroll comes in next year. So if you're doing your budget on a dollar amount,
Yeah.
you're going to have to estimate what you think your payroll is going to be next year.
Right.
And multiply that by the 33.6%. But the requirement will be exactly 33.6% of whatever payroll happens that year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, if the board doesn't have any other questions, then they need to approve it by motion. And then that'll be official for the city and for the state.
well, I think you've done a great job of explaining it to us. The reports seems to be hard for us to find a lot of fault with, or at least the results. So I don't have any questions.
Chairman, a
We'll save them
motion
all
is
for
in
the-
order to adopt.
I'm sorry.
I said a motion is in order to adopt the report.
Right, we were getting there. So if you have any questions, Brett? Would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion. I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Report's adopted. Okay. Anything else you'd like to bring to our attention?
Yep, the second item on the agenda says
Fee structure?
fee structure. And there's a little 2-page or 3-page letter right behind the valuation report.
Why do I feel like I'm not going to like this report as much as I did the last one?
It's not that bad.
That's what the dentist always says.
Don't remind me, my daughter's going next week. So the valuation report has always had a 5% automatic increase each year. But all of our other fees have remained constant for a long time. Like down at the bottom of the page, our hourly rates. We started those in 2007. Benefit calculations, in 2011, we started $200 for those benefit calculations when people retire. And, GASB, the big report in the back, that stayed the same since it started in 2014. And so we're basically just asking for a reset on a lot of those numbers to bring them up to where they should be at the current time. And then we won't do the 5% automatic increase on the valuation anymore. We'll just put everything to be based on CPI each year, starting in 2023. But these numbers would start not till 10/1/2022. And, Burgess and I have been working with you guys a long time, and I really do appreciate it and consider it a privilege. And hopefully you guys are okay with these changes. But I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I only have a question about the online portal. It wasn't needed before. We don't know if it's going to be needed again in the future.
Well, I think, did I propose it? Yeah, and I think the board said no at the time.
Okay.
But it's just software that we've developed so that each member can log in and do benefit projections and everything. So it's NA right now because you guys aren't using it. And if you don't use it, then you don't have to pay anything. But if you did want to use it, it would be $12,500.
Excellent. So it's a service you offer. That we can-
Correct.
So if I understand this, then we'd be going to a current adjustment, an adjustment right now to reset, as you called it. And then for the future, you're talking about an increase every year by the CPI.
Correct. That way we would never have to come and do this again. It would just float with our costs.
And theoretically, could that go up or down?
Correct, yep. If for some reason it's -2%, then we'll go -2%.
But as an actuarial, you're betting that doesn't happen, aren't you?
I hope not for that sake, but -2% inflation would be okay with me in my own life, I guess.
Is this, are you going to this sort of CPI-based adjustment with all of your clients?
Yes.
How did you arrive at the one-time fee adjustment? So, for instance, I mean, they vary. You didn't go across the board. It doesn't appear to me.
Yeah, we really looked at each process, like the benefit calculations. It takes, the member that we have one person that does the benefit calculation and another one that checks it. All of them are peer reviewed. So, the time is about an hour and a half between the two. So we looked at each of these items and looked at what the real cost is and adjusted it. The 112.664 report, we didn't feel that we needed to increase that. So we looked at each item individually.
Okay, I appreciate that. It does, you at least made it look like you had, your fee increases are based upon an item by item calculation. Mr. Bush, you have any comments?
No.
You wanted to comment, didn't you?
Sorry.
How about you, Brett?
No, I'm good. I'll make a motion that we accept.
Any further discussion? If not, then all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes as well.
Well, I really do appreciate it, and I'll stick around in case anything comes up.
We appreciate you. Appreciate you coming up today. And hopefully we'll all continue to benefit from whether it be awfully good planning or some luck and planning or both or whatever. But anyway, appreciate your work, I guess, in your side of the equation. And then do you have anything else you'd like to speak with us about? Okay, then we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is Mr. Chambers.
Good afternoon. Does everybody have a report in their packet? It's a pleasure to be here. I was happy to see Patrick's report that 80% GASB funding ratio is pretty impressive. Really nice to see that. So let's dive into the report. Before I get into this, let's kind of at 15,000 feet understand what's going on here. This is a 60-40 equity fixed income balanced program. The risk profile is less than most of your peers in Florida. They tend to be closer to 70 to 72% exposure to risk or equities. We have been, in the last several years, we've witnessed an enormous run up among growth stocks, particularly technology stocks, the FANG stocks, and the so-called value stocks have lagged. That changed significantly this year so far, where the large cap growth index since January 1st is down about 20%. And the large cap value is down only about 4%. So we've seen an enormous pivot away from technology. What's driving that is one, the Fed's openness about its intent to allow interest rates to move up slowly. And what's happening in Europe is driving up oil prices. And that's an energy play, and that's a big component in the value space. We need to talk about inflation because it's here. Now, it's not all bad from a stock perspective because companies now, someone told me today at lunch that their material costs to build a barn are up 40%. Companies have pricing power they haven't had in decades. Everyone's raising their prices. Corporate America, even the actuaries are raising their prices. But when public companies raise their prices, their revenues go up and their earnings go up. So inflation is actually a tailwind for common stocks. Inflation is a terrible thing for bonds because a bond is a fixed contract payment for the life of the bond. And if that bond is paying 2% and inflation is, what did you say your rates are going up by? 10%? I'm just giving him a hard time. He's a good guy. Why would you want to own a bond that earns 2% when inflation's 10%? So bonds are really a tough thing to be in, but you have a allocation of bonds here because they provide you with liquidity. The primary purpose of the bonds is to be a bucket to make benefit expense payments. That's it. The bonds were never designed to create wealth for this pension plan. Okay, on page 1 is a visual illustration of what we mean when we say the yield curve is moving upwards. You can see these parallel shifts historically going back several years. Back, if you go back to 2013, you can see the yield curve was in a more normal location. Of 2020, August, the yield curve was almost flat. Rates were very low. And so we're seeing that happening as we speak. Now, I should caution you, even though the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell has announced a desire to raise the Fed funds rate, we're really not talking about a big deal because the Fed funds rate has been at 0 for a long time. And if they're going to raise it to 125 basis points, that's still very low, very low. And if they are going to back away from open market operations and allow bonds and mortgage yields to move upwards naturally, well, that means they're moving into a neutral position. They're not becoming draconian. They're allowing or getting back to more of a neutral position. And the Fed's big fear right now is that this inflation, which is a tax, it's a tax. It's an enormous tax. Gasoline, food, lumber and nails to do your barn, all of that in itself will slow the economy faster than any rate increases. And the Fed's aware of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Fed doesn't do a whole lot of raising of rates this year. That's my impression.
You wouldn't be surprised if they don't.
I don't think they're going to move them much. Maybe a couple moves and that's it. I think the Fed's preoccupation right now is with destroying the ruble. Which would be nice. Let's go to page 4. These are the summary remarks. We had a very impressive quarter for the final calendar year quarter, which is your first fiscal year quarter, 512,000, 2.3% net. Results are a little bit behind the model, but this reflects some changes that hadn't yet taken place that were approved at the last meeting. And those changes included splitting the Ceradex small cap value in half with an index and replacing the Schwab REIT with the Dow Jones REIT index. So essentially it was a swap to another index product. The best performer for the quarter were the REITs and followed by mid cap and large cap value. Large cap value continues to be a big performer for you as we speak. For the 12-month period, we saw the REITs were up 37.3%. And this is a diabolically high number. When you consider these REITs are producing about a 2.5%, 3% yield. And where did that come from? Well, it really is associated with the supply chain disruption, the high replacement costs associated with building apartments, logistics, warehousing, office buildings. Everything has gone up in price, and that's what you're seeing in this REIT figure. The 3-year period, let me jump to 5-year because that's what Patrick likes to talk about. 8.9 million was earned and you averaged about 9.7% net. Our budgeted return is 7.5%. So on this rolling 5-year look, it appears that we're well ahead of our targeted 7.5%. There is a 10-year average here for those of you who like to keep statistics. 8.7% was the average return for 10 years per year. And I compliment the board that the mission for most of that 10 years was 8%. Patrick convinced you to gradually go to 7.5 where you are right now. And that was the mission. So mission accomplished. We got it done. And you got it done at the same time by reducing your costs. Your expense ratio is somewhere around 45 basis points. And for a plan this size, that's a good, fair cost structure.
Could I just ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Like you'd said, you'd asked that we make some changes and we did. And what I'm hearing is those have a positive effect.
Yes. Yeah, this has been a very proactive board. Of course, you got Mr. Bush back, with all his wisdom, and I think collectively we've all done a marvelous job here. Just a couple other comments on page 10 or page 9. And then we'll skip page, we'll go to page 10. You can see there's 16 different products across the spectrum from large, mid, small cap, international, infrastructure, bonds, and so forth. You can see on page 12 where the assets, the 22.5 million was invested. The largest allocation is in fixed income. Right now, cash is king. Fixed income is not down as nearly as much as equities. The bonds are down maybe since the beginning of the year, January 1, maybe around 2%, something like that. But the equities are down anywhere between 5 and 20% since January 1st. Not your equities, but the market in general. All right, I'll pause for a minute. See if you have any questions. Now let's go to page 21 while you're thinking of something. These two scattergrams, the 5 and 3 year, allow you to witness, to visualize the returns and risk profile for both periods. The crosshairs represent the strategic model, and the target or the fund itself is the blue. So that you can see that the blue dot and the model are superimposed, which means really that we actually were able to build a mix of managers and products for you that essentially match the model. All the risky stuff is off to the right in the northeast quadrant, and the risk off is the little plus sign, the bonds there in the lower left. And so I think, as I mentioned to you before, if you wanted to get more returns here, we simply would push that line over to the right, up that 45-degree slope towards more risk. And so by doing that, you could expect higher returns. But I think you're in a good spot right now at 60-40. And then on page 22, the history here, going all the way back to 2005.
Did you give us any money back in 2008?
There's still litigation pending on getting that money for you. That's all I really have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I would say this, that we will be pivoting back towards equities at some point. I think our marching orders here are to be vigilant in that regard. And when we believe it's necessary or appropriate to rebalance consistent with the investment policy, we'll do so. But we want to see this thing play out in Europe a little longer, and before we do any pivoting back into equities. Equities actually weren't that expensive before Putin dove into the Ukraine. The S&P was at about 25 times earnings. And a year ago, they were about 36 times earnings. So actually equity valuations were coming back down towards the 15, 16% average, long-term average. And now, of course, they've come way down. So they're down below 18, 17% right now. We'll keep an eye on it. So, anything else? You're thinking?
I have a generic question, or a general question, not
Sure.
generic, I guess. In the industry, your industry, are there projections, predictions, or safeguards that are being recommended in anticipation of what could happen if the oil issue becomes more problematic for well, the world, but particularly America? If Putin, I mean, I don't know that anybody knows what all the potential ramifications are of what he's doing in the Ukraine. But let's say that we're not now, as I understand it, importing any more supposedly Russian oil, correct? In America, we're not. China seems to be a big factor in whether they're going to help Russia. I don't know. I don't know that they do any exporting of oil, but they're a user of oil.
Well, it's interesting how China has become a premier economic and technological power. Yeah, the first time they tried to land a spacecraft on Mars with a rover, they pulled it off. The Russians have tried 6 times, unsuccessful. Russia is a declining state, declining population, declining birth rate. They've had a massive exodus of intelligent people and capital for decades. And China will be buying Russian oil, Urals oil, for quite some time at a big discount. That's all I can report on that. I don't know much more. But I think if the world can keep and his generals can keep him sedated, maybe we can prevent this from getting out of hand any further than it is. We just all pray for that.
Which one sedated? The Putin or the Chinese dude? Both.
China is an enigma. They want it both ways. They want a centrally controlled communist regime, and they want a democracy. I shouldn't say democracy. They want capitalism weaved into that, and it's a very unusual experiment. But I think, as far as we're concerned here, as long as I've been in this industry it's been a long time, almost 40 years. We've had difficult time periods, and when stocks are sold off and become depressed, if you have the means to get back into stocks, you should do it. Now, I'm not talking about Argentinian stocks. I'm not talking about Venezuelan stocks. I'm talking about American companies. They always come back. So we're in a position to do that at the right time. I just wouldn't worry about it. Long-term nature of this plan, you've gone through some tough periods. We're certainly going to have more in the future. That's why the bonds are there. They provide liquidity, and there's an asymmetry relative to equities, and that's why we use them. That's the purpose of them.
Well, Burgess, you got that screen up there right now. That's to your point that you need to ride it out because it comes.
Yes.
We didn't change our asset allocation in 2008, right?
Actually, we did a pivot in 2009. 2009 was a tough year until April. And I believe around May, we started moving back into equities. And that really finally kicked in 2010. The reason why 9 looks rough here is because the first quarter of 2009, the market was down 30%. It still finished out your fiscal year at 3.5%. That's October 1 through September 30. So half of that fiscal year was really in the basement. Thank you.
No, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I don't have any either. Appreciate it. Appreciate your
You're welcome.
hard work as of course always, and also appreciate you not hitting it with a rate increase, but of course I guess you.
That's the next meeting. I'll try
Yeah,
that.
I don't know that appear. All right, so
Should we accept his report?
yeah, I was going to ask for a motion to accept the report.
I'll make a motion. We accept the report.
Okay. So any further questions, discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So item 5 is Ms. Parrish. Is she with us?
Her father's here.
Her boss is on.
Okay.
Hi,
All
I'm Bob Klausner. Anna is my daughter, and happy to have had her in the firm now for 6 years. We have not met. Just a little bit about me. I'm a Florida native. My mother was a Florida native. And I have been practicing in the area of state and local government retirement plans for 45 years. So Burgess was like in high school when I started. And I have two very brief things to report. First thing is the legislature adopted committee substitute for Senate Bill 7055 related to cybersecurity. It relates to local governments, and it's going to require anybody who has access to municipal government IT to have a training course, and it also requires some security upgrades. Cities of 25,000 or more will have to have it done by 2024. Cities of less than 25,000, I believe, although the metropolitan area of Palatka and Putnam County is much bigger than 25,000. The city limits is about 11 or 12.
10,500 actually.
What's the?
About 10,500 plus or minus.
So you have until 2025 to comply. The bill hasn't yet been signed by the governor. It'll have a July 1 effective date. Florida League of Cities has put out some guidance on it. It's not really intended to apply specifically to pension funds, but I know that we use the city, as I understand it, for our email communication and for our cyber work. So the burden will be on the city. Cybersecurity issues have increasingly been a concern for pension funds. I know that Baltimore City got hit twice, once in 2020 and again last year, and they paid a total of $18 million in ransom. At the other end of the spectrum, City of Miami got hit, their pension fund, and the ransom was like $8,800. And they were able to get it back, by the way, by working backwards to whoever put malware in their system. The other item has to do with a question that we get asked frequently about investment in cryptocurrency. And although they don't have any supervisory authority over public plans, the Department of Labor actually issued a warning that says that any fiduciary that is using cryptocurrency as an investment will certainly face considerable scrutiny for the proper exercise of its fiduciary duty. I don't know if that's an offering by the city in its 457 plan. And in a defined benefit plan, the members own a contract essentially for their defined benefit. So less of a concern for this board being in a defined benefit plan. But to the extent that anybody had drop money in a self-directed account or 457 money in accounts chosen by the city had that availability, it would require some additional scrutiny to avoid potential liability. And
Mr. Chambers told us I couldn't bring that word up in meetings.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Mr. Chambers previously advised me that I could not bring that word up in meetings as a topic for discussion.
Burgess and I know each other
Yes.
very well, and we are of one mind. In fact, Burgess's daughter and Anna were classmates together at Stetson Law School, and Burgess and I have known each other for 90, 100 years. And he does, by the way, he does a fine job for you and all of his clients. And he and I are of one mind. I can't see investing in something that isn't backed by anything. And so that's always been the primary concern for me. So I'm glad he put the hex on it for you. Any other questions for me?
What year did you, were you admitted to the bar in Florida?
I'm sorry.
In what year were you admitted to the bar in Florida?
I was admitted to the bar in 1977.
So I was admitted in November of 76.
You beat me by a year.
I understand.
Where did you go to law school?
Florida State.
I was a Gator.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say the same thing, but I wanted to be polite. No, FSU is a great school. In fact, we've hired FSU grads before. So I'm also a member of the Texas bar and the Wisconsin bar. Texas made me take a test. Wisconsin let me in just because they said I was a nice person.
Always good to keep your options open.
It is. It is. You never know when you're going to have to flee.
That's right.
So,
Okay, well, we appreciate it very much. I may have a question for you or your daughter on the side. I won't take the time. It's not a question that applies to the general fund. So I'll make contact myself.
you have Anna's email and mine is just Bob and hers is Anna@robertdklausner.com. Email us both and one of us will answer your question for sure.
I appreciate that very much.
No problem.
Does anyone else have any questions at all? Okay, then if not, we appreciate you attending and giving us benefit of your report and our update. We are, as a rule in the city, pretty conscious of the cybersecurity issue. We have just gone out for a bid on our IT services and we'll be making an award at this next meeting. And the cybersecurity issue is one that we have emphasized in our discussions with our respondents. So I know that's no guarantee, but we're at least cognizant of the need and trying to address it as best we can.
Yeah, it's very important. I don't think you can overemphasize it. We've gone to, the dual identification for our email. And we've had cyber insurance for several years as a protection for our clients. We don't have access to, financial information or member information that isn't otherwise public, but you don't want to get locked up where you can't operate just because somebody decided to try to make a little extra money on you.
All right, sir. Well, thanks very much. If there's no further questions, we appreciate you attending and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Do you need me to remain on, Mr. Chairman?
No, sir, I don't believe so.
That way I turn the clock off faster.
Oh, well, please, can you back it up some?
Sure. It's always a pleasure. Thank you. We appreciate the honor of representing the Palatka employees.
Matter of fact, if we had known we were on the clock, we'd put you up number one on the agenda.
Well, I made it go slow. Don't worry. It was a cheap meeting.
All right, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, item number 6 is first quarter expenditures.
Basically, it details the contribution refunds, the different expenses from the investment monitor.
We can't hear you.
It details the expenses from the actuary, the attorney, the admin expenses, which are the liability insurance and the what else is in it? Admin, 2 other admins, but it's pretty much on par with the budget right now. We didn't receive Burgess's invoice until after December 31st, so you're going to see that on the next quarter.
He did that on purpose.
You know, a lot of the invoices have been coming in late due to COVID, basically. Readjustment of duties, you know, things fall off the radar for a lot of companies right now. They're still catching up.
And you never make excuses for me when I screw up. Why?
I'm very generous for other people. Okay.
Any questions? No questions, then we'll move on to the next item. You want to accept that report of quarterly expenditures? Motion,
I'll make a motion. We accept the report.
second, Mr. Bush.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, sir.
Well, every year when you do the valuation, you're supposed to do that declaration of expected returns for the next year, the next several years, and the long term thereafter. And we always use the same as what we do in the valuation report. And you guys just changed it to 7.4. So you could make that declaration by motion.
I have no questions about that. Does anyone else have any? That's our rate of expected return. As you know, the lower we, as I understand it, the lower we set that, the higher our contributions have to be. The
Correct.
higher we set that, the lower. You've traditionally operated in a fairly conservative range, and the 7.4 is.
Correct.
So does anyone have a question?
But to be clear, our contribution is actually going down, right?
Yeah, because we beat that assumption.
Yeah.
Returns.
Yes, sir.
But that's the expectation, the 7.4 is. So you have a question? Do you have a question? So he's asking for a declaration as to our expected rate of return.
Trying to formulate that in my head.
No, you can just say so moved.
I'll do the motion. Actually, you just did it, but you're gonna do the motion? I'll declare as your consultant that the plan will earn 7.4% next year, over the next several years, and over the long term. And then if you would just put that in the form of an email is all that's necessary and provide that to the state. Take care of that.
Fantastic. Do I second that motion?
Please. Well, you make the motion and then someone else can second. Mr. Chambers can't make the motion.
I will,
So moved.
so moved. Sorry.
Any discussion? I have no question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm just gonna check with Sunny if there's any.
Public comments? Okay, great. You have a drive back in the rain, Mr. Chambers?
2 hours, and I'm driving an electric car that has very limited range, so I have to drive under the speed limit.
They convince you to go get electric car, 100% electric?
I bought it in 2014.
We've had it a while.
Mistake I made was I should have bought the stock. I should have bought the stock and not the car.
There you go.
Is it a Tesla, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a great car. Best car I've ever owned.
Yeah.
Have you?
I've ridden it.
Zero.
So when are you replacing the batteries?
The year I bought it, there's no cost to me if I ever replace them. They're 24,000 a set. But,
So as long as you drive it, as long as you own it, the batteries are free. That was a pretty good investment.
because the year I bought it, people thought he was another DeLorean. They weren't so sure about this guy. But he's for real. It's a great company.
How far will it run? How many miles?
That's personal. On a charge? It'll go about 230 miles on a charge, but they've doubled that now.
You don't drive it to North Carolina.
Be about 5 stops. It's a long trip.
No public comment.
Thank you. All right, no public comment. I'm sorry about your, did you get a $7,000 tax credit when you bought it?
$7,500, yes.
There you go. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're having good luck with it. reading mixed reviews, and my friends in the auto industry say I'm maybe a little bit late, a little bit early. I actually test drove a Mustang Mach-E.
I saw that car.
It's a nice car.
400-mile range with the upgrade.
Yeah, nice,
Beautiful car.
nice car, great driver. But
But it's the first generation.
I know.
You buy a Tesla, you can buy a third and fourth generation. Now, I bought a first gen, no issues.
You
He's quite a salesman, huh?
either, yeah, he's probably getting a commission of some sort.
The salesperson was a woman who was attending FIU. And she was an engineer. She knew her stuff. I was so impressed with her knowledge of the company. I gave her a deposit.
Does it have that? big-
Sounds like it's worked out well for you. 8 years on a.
It has that big screen in the middle with all the maps. in it. Yeah, I've ridden in one before, just straight acceleration, no shifting, like you're expecting a car,
Remember
just,
when you were a kid, did you ever have a slot car?
Mhm.
Remember slot cars?
no.
It's
I
a
do.
Slot car. 18,000 RPM slot.
And as the salesman told me, go ahead and take it out down the street and stomp on the accelerator.
Yeah.
It will,
It
it's
moves.
pretty impressive, stoplight to stoplight.
Yeah, I don't drive it that fast. I get 60,000 miles out of a set of tires,
Wow.
How many miles do you have on it?
about 130.
That's quite a testament, actually.
If you want to drive to Nebraska, you should have a nice truck. But if you want to drive to Jacksonville or drive down to Orlando, electric cars fine.
Mhm.
You know, and I'm sure yours does the same, but the Mustang had an automatic feature on the GPS. You just push a button and it'd tell you where the closest charging station was and distance and directions and all as you travel.
You know, Ford and Volkswagen are like this. So they're both sharing technology with, and then space. Ford's got a good product. Why don't you get one?
You know, I don't have the patience for multiple charges to make a trip.
You have to think about what you're about to do.
Yeah, well, I've been accused of not doing that enough too.
How long did it take to charge? Well, it depends. About 20 minutes, I can get 120 mile boost range. That's usually all I get, 20 miles, 20 minutes. Good luck. I'll see you soon.
Good luck to you.
Bye, thanks.
Are you still want a heads up on, well, you'll be back next week, right?
I'll be back next week. Where's that meeting? Afternoon or morning?
It's in 1:30 in the afternoon,
3:30?
1:30.
1:30 for the police. Thank you.
Okay, next item is other business. Do we have other business, Ms. Jill?
No.
Anyone else want to bring up anything? Miss Val, you still with us?
Yes, sir, I am.
Any other business?
Not for me, no, sir.
Okay, then if we don't have any other business, then I'm going to declare the meeting to be adjourned.